Okay, well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the second installment in Preservation Connecticut's Winter 2022 series talking about preservation. Our noontime forums we've been holding for almost 2 years now. That's crazy. 2 years. This is number 39, so that's kind of great. I am Stacy Vero, Circuit Rider at Preservation Connecticut, and I'm delighted to be your host today. I'm standing in for our Executive Director, Jane Montanaro, who we will miss. But today we're going to quickly just reintroduce ourselves as an organization and then move on to each of the Circuit Riders to talk a little bit about our backgrounds. And then we'll talk about what we do at Preservation Connecticut and then open it up to you all to ask your questions. So Jordan, can you give me the next slide? So to begin, a little background on us. Preservation Connecticut is the statewide private nonprofit historic preservation organization. We were founded in 1975 by a special act of the Connecticut General Assembly as the Connecticut Trust for Historic Preservation. Our mission is to preserve, protect, and promote the buildings, sites, and landscapes that contribute to the heritage and vitality of Connecticut's communities. For over 4 decades, we've successfully championed the protection of remarkable community assets all over the state by leveraging funding, advocating, forming partnerships, and promoting stewardship. These talks came about during the early days of the pandemic as a way to help educate the public on various important topics related to the field of historic preservation. And it's also a way for us to introduce you to experts in the field and to provide you with additional resources. Most importantly, it's been a way to connect with and to hear from you. Next slide. Our office, which you see there, is on Whitney Avenue in Hamden. It's the Eli Whitney boarding house built in 1827 to house workers for Eli Whitney's nearby factory. It has served as Preservation Connecticut's headquarters since 1989 and is listed on the National Register of Historic Places. And it's also thanks to a grant from the Historic Restoration Fund and a lot of work by Mike has recently been repainted. So it's all fresh and new. We have a staff of 9 preservation professionals, which you see there, and an active board of 21 preservationists from around the state. Staff listed here are always available to assist with inquiries. We have Jane, who's not with us, our executive director, Chris Wiegren, Deputy Director. You can contact Chris for questions about our easement programs, Connecticut preservation news articles, and a recently completed survey of Frederick Law Olmsted sites in the state. Also, you can contact him for book talks. I think those are back on his published work, Connecticut Architecture, Stories of 100 Places. Renee Trabert is our Making Places and Preservation Services Manager. You can contact Renee for information on redevelopment of historic industrial sites and tax credit applications. Jordan Sorensen is our Development and Special Projects Manager. Jordan manages our communications and outreach to members through social media, our blog, and email. She also receives and monitors demolition notices from municipalities and prepares historic tax credit applications and nominations to the state and national register. Kristen Hopewood is our development assistant, and she manages all of the inquiries that come into the office. Through our website, she provides member services, arranges special events, and is the editor of our Historic Properties Exchange, a free listing of endangered and threatened properties. And finally, our team of circuit riders, Brad Scheid, Mike Perino, me, Stacy Vero, and our newest member, Stefan Danzig. So wave, Stefan, you're new. We provide in-the-field services to homeowners, developers, municipal leaders, historic district commissions, nonprofit organizations, and museums. We address an array of preservation needs, including community organizing, prioritizing maintenance and repairs, evaluating historic designations, and trying to track down funding for sites. So these previous forums that I spoke about earlier are all recorded and they're available on our YouTube channel, so you can go back and look through those. But today, please feel free to use the chat feature if you want to ask some questions or raise your hand in the Zoom function there, or you can just wait till the end of the presentation and join in the discussion. You can always contact us after too. We have all of those, our emails listed. So with that, I'm going to give you a little bit of background on myself and how I got into this. I began my work about 20 years ago, originally as an art history major. I took some of my master classes at BU and then moved on to Savannah College of Art and Design, where I got an MFA in historic preservation. I started my own business after that, after doing a ton of free internships at the Wadsworth and Weir Farm and Historic New England, Connecticut Landmarks, all of those places. They all had different names back then. But I worked as a private consultant in a transportation planning firm after that for a few years, and then moved on to the State Historic Preservation Office, where I was the State and National Register Coordinator for 7 years. Then I had my kid and I left to go back into private consulting, and then came here about 4 years ago. So I've worked all over the place. I've worked in Oregon, Virginia, all throughout New England, New York City, lots of different places. And as a circuit rider, my work is really focused on working with municipalities on local historic district issues a little bit. Brad does that as well, but I've done some trainings here and there and some small scale advocacy efforts where I'll go in and just discuss a specific issue. You know, we work a lot with community groups that are either part of the municipality, like a local historic district mission or a historic society, or we will just talk to folks who are interested. There are people who just are concerned about certain properties coming down. We'll go and talk to them. We'll write letters of support, hold meetings, whatever it takes. I also do research on historic properties for people. So we help to work with the SHPO to see if properties could be eligible. We don't make those determinations in-house, but we do help people put information together to send in for the SHPO to make those determinations. And I live in Woodbury, so I'm the westernmost located of my colleagues. So I tend to work in Fairfield and Litchfield County, but we all go everywhere, wherever we're needed. So that's kind of me in a nutshell. Most recently, I'm working with Jenny Schofield on a project to update National Register listings. So in the 1970s and 80s, when the program was new, the listings were really broad and did not have a lot of information. They didn't have a lot of social history. So I'm working on just improving those and delisting properties that are no longer there, that type of work. So that's what I'll be focusing on beginning this year. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to the first original circuit rider, Brad Scheid. Brad.
One and only, yeah. Yes, I am the original circuit rider. Prior to circuit riding staff, formerly the Connecticut Trust for Historic Preservation was mostly they did an annual conference and they took phone calls. Our previous executive director decided that was not enough, and she raised bundles of money to basically hire a circuit rider program, which started. I was the original, but there was another from New Haven, from the New Haven Foundation, the Hartford Foundation. We had, and she put together all kinds of funding, and it was pretty amazing. The model, by the way, it does work very well in New England because the states are small. Vermont actually was the original program, so we stole the idea from them. And actually, as we put this together, we had very close conversations with Vermont, but also with the National Trust for Historic Preservation. When I first started, the National Trust was putting a lot of resources and time into this as well. So when I first started, it was actually, I had two masters, the National Trust for Historic Preservation and the Connecticut Trust for Historic Preservation. So I kind of worked for both, and we kind of did field service and field staff on behalf of both, which was quite complex. My background, I was hired, I just answered a newspaper ad, but my background is I have a master's in urban planning from New York. And I was at the time, I have a business on the side, consulting business for housing development. And I saw an ad in the paper, current. And it basically said, hey, looking for somebody to look at properties, historic properties. I mean, they're going to pay me to do that? They said, hey, that sounds like a good idea. So anyway, I did interview. My background around historic preservation really came in New York when I was doing my master's at Columbia. There was a number of historic preservation and urban planning are very similar in its disciplines, and I kind of heavy dose there, but it really wasn't until I sat down with Helen Higgins and the National Trust and Vermont and all these folks before they hired me, and I realized that this is a real passion of mine too. Again, my theme is historic preservation, but it's also community development and urban planning. I think they all kind of go together in my head. So what have I been doing? Basically, as Stacy said, we handle calls and we go everywhere that's available. Although with COVID, that's been a little more restricted. But we do have kind of interest areas that we've kind of gravitated to, I think. One of the things that I produced state money is called the VCI program, Vibrant Community Initiative Grant. Goes to municipalities to help solve kind of community development, historic issues. SEPA, Connecticut Environmental Protection Act. As you know, it's very unique to this state where we can actually try to stop demolitions of property in the public interest. I also spend a lot of time with historic developers on this state historic tax credit program, and we have a program there. And I mean, I could go on and on. And I do live, I live what I say. I live in a National Register house on Main Street in Wallingford. So I believe in what I talk about. But I don't know, Stacy, do you want me to add any more to that?
Nope, that's good. You can go to Mike.
Hi, my name is Mike Perino. I am a circuit rider. I started at then the Connecticut Trust for Historic Preservation around 2012, I believe. And I worked on the statewide industrial survey, the Making Places project, after I had completed a master's degree in public history at Central Connecticut State University. I subsequently left the trust to pursue a PhD in history at the University of Delaware, something that I'm still working to complete. And I came back to the Preservation Connecticut at the same time Stacy came on in, I guess, mid 2019, somewhere around there, maybe a little earlier. As Brad pointed out, we all respond to all sorts of inquiries, but my kind of silo specialty has been our Preservation Connecticut's funding programs. I am kind of the de facto administrator of those programs. So if you have any questions about our 1772 Foundation program, our maintenance and repair grant program, I'm happy to take those questions. I also assist the State Historic Preservation Office with their historic easement program. So if you're a member of an organization that has a historic easement, you may have seen my name in that capacity as well. And I think that's it for me.
Stefan, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Yeah. Short, sweet. Good job, Mike.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I'm Stefan Denchuk, the newest member. This is only my third week here. I'm the archaeological expert on the team now. I did my undergrad at UConn, where I did history with a minor in anthropology. I worked on a field school with Dan Adler, where I focused on lithic technology. But I have some background in zoo archaeology as well. Then I worked on a master's, same program at Central, the public history, where I'm still working on that now. Working on historic tax credits actually was my focus in legislation. And then I started working as a field archaeologist for the past 2 years. Basically, once COVID came around, I started that work where I've worked all over New England, finding archaeological sites, both pre and post contact, native and older colonial industrial sites as well. But my expertise is more focused on native cultures, though I've been diving into historical archaeology to make sure that I'm prepared for whatever comes my way. But I'm very excited to be part of the team and can't wait to really start getting out there and seeing what everyone has questions about. So thank you.
And I should add that I live in East Haddam, so I'm the easternmost circuit rider.
Great. So with that, let's open it up to you all. We have some slides that, just talk about our most common issues that we deal with as circuit riders that'll sort of play in the background, but it's open to the public. So please ask your questions. We have some that were previously submitted, if people are being shy.
Start with those, Stacy.
Okay. So the first one is, this is going to go to Stefan. What are the best strategies for conducting archaeology at historic home sites?
Well, my first question would be, why are you conducting archaeology? In my professional opinion is that there's no need to dig unless you're going to be impacting the site. If you're asking questions about what might have been here, especially for a historic site, you can do research and see, land grants and stuff like that, kind of look up old aerial photographs and such, like, those kind of things to see if something was there. However, if you're doing construction, making an addition to the home, then I, would generally suggest that you simply do a number of test pits, is what we call them, just, small, half meter by half meter holes that you dig through, you screen through the soils and try to find any artifacts. But that the best way is to not do archaeology, if that makes sense, because we're here to conserve these sites. The less that we have to impact them, the better.
So would you suggest contacting the state archaeologist or Sarah Sportman or
so you can get in contact with the Preservation Connecticut, with me. The state archaeologist has a lot on her plate. I just met with her this morning. So if something is deemed a potential for a site, then we would get in contact with her. But first, we have to make sure that it's a legitimate site and that there's some kind of significance to it.
That's great that we have you now to be that intermediary. That's great. Okay, next question we got was, have you any recommendations on referrals to find and qualify skilled preservation craftsmen, such as plasterers, lime mortar masons, timber framers, etc.? So, Mike, do you want to take that one?
Sure. We do maintain a list of contractors on our website, which you should, which Jordan just put in the chat. There are, of course, many more contractors out there than that list is not exhaustive. So, a lot of, we may have connections to specific contractors. So if you reach out to one of us, we may be able to put you in contact with someone. I think a lot depends on the scope of the work that you're doing, the size of the work, and the location in which you're doing it. So take a look at our resource that Jordan put down in the chat, but certainly if you're having trouble finding someone, we can try to help you. So reach out to us.
Great. And the next one's going to go to you too, Mike, because it's available funding in the state for historic preservation projects. Where can we find that? And we do have a slide on that, Jordan. I think it's the next one for people. Nope, next one, I guess, sorry. There we go.
Well, we could talk about funding for the rest of the time here, but very basically, I'll just go over the main ones, and then if people have specific questions about them, feel free to ask. So, Preservation Connecticut offers 3 principal funding sources. 2 of them are only offered once a year, and we're in the middle of those grant rounds right now. The first one is through a partnership with the 1772 Foundation. That's a capital grant, meaning construction, restoration, preservation projects. The grant is for up to $10,000. It's a matching grant, which means that every dollar you are awarded, your organization would need to put in $1. That grant is only for nonprofits. No municipalities and no churches are allowed to apply for that grant. And like I said, we are currently in that funding round next year. So if you haven't submitted an application, you would be looking at next winter. And the other one is the maintenance and repair grant. They sound confusing and are often confused together, but this grant is also capital, so restoration, preservation work, but it's specific to religious organizations. And the reason that program shifted that way was because religious organizations are not allowed to apply for the 1772 funding. And that grant is also 1-for-1 matching for up to $15,000. And if anyone is a member of a historic church that's listed on the state or national register, which is a qualification, and they're interested in that program, feel free to reach out to me after this talk, because we have a pre-application that is due on the 31st, which I think is pretty soon. So then we have another program which we call the Tac Program, which stands for Technical Assistance Consultancy. I'm sorry, I had to think about that for a second. And it's not really so much of a grant as it is a way for us to kind of try to provide some immediate need to historic sites to nonprofits and municipalities, so we can hire directly an architect or an engineer if there's some kind of safety concern or we need a quick opinion about a project that's going on. You contact us for that as well. And then the state has a couple funding sources. The first 2, the Survey and Planning Grant and the Historic Restoration Funds, are for nonprofits and municipalities. The Survey and Planning Grant is up to $20,000 matching grant that could cover soft costs of architectural fees, engineering fees. It could also cover things like adding properties to the National or State Register of Historic Places, and a variety of other things, which I would suggest that you either contact us or you could look on their website. That's the State Historic Preservation Office, to learn more about what that can cover. And then the Historic Restoration Fund grant is a capital grant similar to our 2 grants, which is 1-for-1 matching grant. And currently the max for each project is up to $200,000. And then there is a historic homes tax credit for houses that are listed on the state or national register in the state of Connecticut. So if you're a private homeowner and you're thinking about doing some restoration work to your house, you should consider that program, and you can reach out to us about information regarding that program as well.
Great. Thanks, Mike.
Should just add to that is that we're statutory partners for SHPO, so, or at State Historic Preservation Office. So, you know, a lot of times, as Mike said, you can kind of go through us, then we can link you up with some of these SHPO programs as well.
So we did get a couple of questions through the chat. The first one was from Barbara Geddes. Barbara asked, she has church clients with steel windows, and they're in the ancillary structures, not in the main churches, but they're both in historic districts. What is the current view on window replacement for steel windows with aluminum alternatives? Brad, do you have any insight on this one?
Well,
Or Mike?
it's very delicate. Certainly, if you're asking for our involvement or the historic SHPO office or the National Trust office, obviously trying to replicate, well, obviously the goal is to repair the windows, and I can't tell from the email whether they're reparable, or whether you can repair them or not. Window replacements are usually scorned unless you know, there's just no other way to do it. But again, if you're using kind of historic resources to do this, you would have to kind of historically match what the window is. You know, it's you know, it would be something, if something like this, we would, that's really the reason for site visits. You know, we'd have to look at it, understand it, you know, and try to evaluate what the next step are. But yeah, all these churches, window replacement is probably going to be really expensive. So that's why we always try to focus on repairs if possible.
And it would depend on the funding source, right? So would it,
correct.
and then we would coordinate with the SHPO if it was SHPO funding to see if aluminum would be considered an in-kind replacement for steel. I think that's the path we'd probably follow, right?
Yeah, and to get to that answer, you know, we would need pretty detailed specifications, you know, real kind of detailed kind of, you know, what's the aluminum, what's the quality, how's it going to look when it's up. Again, you're dealing with folks here. What our goal is, as Stacy said early on, is we're trying to save historic resources and restore them, not necessarily replace them. So, but I think we all understand that sometimes windows have to be replaced, and it's complicated.
So Scott Spiel at Condot has asked a question for Stefan. Scott, if you want to just ask, you're welcome to do that.
Sure. Thank you. Yeah, I'd like to welcome Stefan and introduce myself as a National Preservation, National Register Specialist at CTDOT. I'm glad we've got a circuit rider that's specifically focused now on archaeological resources and things like that. I think that's
exciting. So are we.
Yeah, so I mean, that's pretty exciting. And, you know, as a member representative of a large state agency, you know, it can be kind of a challenge for us to maintain and advance historic preservation stewardship and cultural resource stewardship. And archaeology often is kind of, you know, the second thought redheaded stepchild sometimes to preservation. So I commend Preservation Connecticut for, you know, recognizing that and getting somebody specifically on board for it, and welcome Stefan. Look forward to working with you. My question for you is kind of, if are there any plans or efforts to perhaps develop some kind of special award specifically for archaeological resources, or maybe just for large state agencies in our preservation efforts? Because, you know, we try to do a lot. It can be a challenge to advance preservation in an agency context, you know, with the other mission concerns that are always at the forefront. And it would be really helpful for us if, we were getting a little more recognition for our efforts than we did. That can go a long way in touting to management and things like that, that what we're doing is worthwhile. So that's kind of my question. Are there any plans? Probably, Stefan, you're probably too new there, haven't even thought about such things yet. But, as a general question to the group, I was just wondering if that had ever crossed anybody's mind.
I
Well, I
think,
mean-
yeah, go ahead, Mike. Go ahead.
Oh.
Or
No.
Stefan.
Well, I think that's a great suggestion. I think, as you pointed out, at least Preservation Connecticut, our focus hasn't been on archaeology. So, we have our annual awards, obviously, which are, dedicated to preservation projects. But, certainly now that we have Stefan, we're going to be thinking about those projects in a different light. And it's certainly, I think, something we would be interested in discussing as an organization. Stacy, I don't know if you...
Definitely. That's exactly what I was going to say. Something we should just talk about going forward.
I mean,
'Cause
I'm all
it's-
for it.
Yeah.
I'd love to
Yeah.
recognize the efforts of people, that are focusing on things that are in the ground, and particularly not disturbing those things a lot when possible. Those mitigation efforts that I know CT, Department of Transportation, has done in the past. So
Mhm.
something we'll probably talk about.
Yeah, great. And if you have any other concerns with us, I'm pretty easy to find. I can get you an email address or a phone number that you want to know about what's going on at the department. I'll be happy to share that with you, establish a relationship. So,
Yes, I'll be in touch then. Thank you.
Okay, Terry Wilson, would you like to ask your question? Terry? All right. If you might be muted, so if
Oh, I thought
Everyone
I
is
had
automatically muted. They have to take.
Oh, there you go.
themselves off.
there. I thought I was automatically muted. Sorry about that. Okay, I'm with the Avon Historical Society, and we have been successful in getting a 1772 grant, maintenance repair grants for various projects over the years. So I thank you for all that. So Mike, I have several questions. First of all, the 1772 grants, back when they were first initiated, I believe they were for Rhode Island and Connecticut. And then I know Massachusetts was added in, I think, in the last several years, which has probably diluted the amount of money we can get here. Is that kind of why you don't have enough to go around for all the requests, or do you simply have more requests than you really have money for? Had the amount of money you've gotten for Connecticut gone down? That's question one.
We always have more requests than money.
Okay, but when they opened it up to Massachusetts, did that bring down the amount you normally can give out because they added that in?
Yeah, Mike, you go ahead. I mean, what's your thoughts?
I think it did go down. It wasn't just Massachusetts. It's also Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont.
In New Jersey too, right?
Yeah, New Jersey. So it's expanded quite a bit. The amount did go down, which, obviously does impact the amount of organizations we can grant money to. And as Brad said, we're always overprescribed, and the amount of inquiries we've been getting have been steadily increasing as well. So that's made it a challenge for us to pick 10 or 12 projects every year. But, certainly there are a lot more worthy projects out there. And that's, partly why, even in this funding slide that you're seeing, we refer a lot of people to our partners at the State Historic Preservation Office because they have an alternative and sometimes a complementary funding source in the Historic Restoration Fund grant. So sometimes if our 1772 grant can't work, that one can work for organizations or vice versa.
Well, the 1772 is easier to apply for. The state one is more complicated. And for when you're looking for just like, $5,000, you have to decide whether it's worth it time and the effort to go through the SHPO one versus the 1772 one. But more importantly, and on a little bit different scale, we're in the middle of it, working with our town of Avon on an adaptive reuse of an 1823 schoolhouse to bring it back into a modern museum. It was a museum for a long time, but we really went into disrepair. So we are doing an adaptive reuse, which means we're keeping the footprint of the schoolhouse, but we're really changing it all out because it really isn't as authentic. But the footprint is nice and it's going to go back to looking like that. Some of the little work we need that I wasn't 100% familiar with your TAC grants, so thank you for sharing what that is, because there may come a couple of questions that we have about a building that is on the state register, 1823, being adaptively reused, so not restored. Do we have to, are we grandfathered in, or do we have to make it fully handicapped accessible to reopen it?
Yeah, the TAC is kind of designed for that. It's kind of, it's usually a structural engineer or an architect looking at one kind of discrete problem. It's not a lot of money, and when we have to work with a consultant to keep the numbers down. But I don't know, Mike. I don't know what you think of that particular example, but and the larger picture is we try to use it, and we don't have a whole lot of it, and we try to use it, where we think it could make the next step work, meaning, funding work or the building work or something. But Mike, you can certainly add to that.
I think I'd have to think about specifically the context of who's so I'm assuming it's the town building department that's requesting a change. I think the goal for most organizations are to provide universal access to museum buildings, but certainly that needs to be done in a way that's sensitive to the building itself, and that might be a way that we can hire someone to kind of troubleshoot, to figure out a solution that may impact the historic building.
So does the town request it because it's the town property, or because we have the society has the lease on it? Do we contact you? Because we're doing this project jointly. We've raised part of the money. They're putting in some money. This is kind of a big joint.
Well, you could contact us
and go through the process. So is it a grant? Is TAC a grant application?
No, we do it at our discretion. So, I think this would warrant, feel free to reach out to me, and you and I can have a longer conversation about what's going on, and then we can move on from there. But there's no application.
Okay.
Well, and let me be clear, and just to add to append that, this is not to hire an architect to do the actual design work. Just using your example, one thing we can maybe do, but we have to go out and double check. It would be like a code review,
Yep.
And an opinion about how to do it.
Yep.
We don't necessarily have the money. We used to, but we don't necessarily have the money to actually have the architect do the actual design. So I want to be clear. The TAC is supposed to be a way to kind of jumpstart and review something. But then, you do have to hire, maybe find more money to actually hire. Is that fair, Mike?
Yeah, and that would probably be, if that's the end goal, is to find some kind of design solution. My advice would probably be to apply for SHPO's survey and planning grant to have that design work.
Yeah, it isn't
done.
design work. We're just wondering, do we have to comply, or do we get grandfathered in because it's a 200-year-old building that's just being adaptively reused? In other words, like we're talking about widths of doors and a ramp to get in.
Right. So yeah, so I think I'm happy to talk to you.
Okay, I'll get a hold of you.
More about that.
Okay, and Stefan, I'm glad you're there because Avon's the site of the Brian Jones site. And we have been doing webinar sessions to educate the public on this time period, working with David Leslie very closely on a lot of the planning for that. Great speakers coming. I'll make sure you get a list of our upcoming series because we've got an awful lot going on for the 12,500-year-old information. So it's very cool. That's what's going on there, and it's a lot of fun. So it's great as the story is evolving and it's coming out.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. I look
Yeah.
forward to hearing more about it.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Terry. So Barbara asked, can a park already on the National Register have its previous designations strengthened? And particularly when landscape isn't really mentioned as part of that designation. Yes, the short answer is yes, it can. We could contact, you can talk to me about it, be happy to talk to you about it further. You can just send me an email and we can get the conversation started about that. But definitely, and we would coordinate with Jenny Schofield at the SHPO to get that going. And then Tim Smith from Enfield, he has a house, I think this is for you, Stefan, on Route 5 in Enfield. It was built in 1831, but it was moved in 1937 to its present location. And there's always been a small mound or hill where the house used to be. Tim, if you're on, you can explain this yourself if you'd like.
Okay.
Tim,
You're
you're
muted
muted.
again.
Yeah, you're muted.
This is, am I unmuted
You're good.
now?
You're
Okay,
good, yep.
It's right at the intersection of Route 5 and Oliver Road, and there's been this mound there forever and ever. And I'm very curious to see whether the original stone foundation is under that mound. And I've been curious about that for a long time. And I was wondering if there's some type of grant or something along that line that could help me, because if there is any of that stone there, I would like to rebuild the original water well that was in the front yard using that stone, possibly. So
Okay.
that's my thought.
I don't believe there's any grants that would assist with that. It's possible that the foundation is still there, but that would require, a nice big archaeological dig, and probably a lot of fill would have to be moved to get access to those stones.
Possibly, yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. So no, there's not funding available for that, but that could be a fun personal project.
Okay, all right, thanks.
And then Wendy Belmore. Hi, Wendy. Do funds address cemetery preservation? So short answer, yes. We were talking about this right before the call. There have been a number of cemeteries that we've seen who've gotten survey and planning grant, survey and planning money to sort of record the cemetery. But Stefan, I think you had some specific information related to a recent project that might make sense. Do you know where that funding came from?
I'm not 100% positive. I believe it was from the surveying and planning grant. When I was working at a cultural resource management firm, I worked with the Ancient Burying Ground Association on the Hartford Ancient Burying Ground to survey their entire collection of headstones and tables. I apologize, I don't have that information.
Yeah.
I was just the grunt work.
But it's it's there. I don't think that the Historic Restoration Fund that's something we need to look into further. That's my best answer, right?
I believe the Historic Restoration Fund has been used for cemetery capital improvements, but we need to confirm that.
Yeah, definitely.
If I could just add a sub question to that. So older cemeteries, and the background on this is I got involved with Wreaths Across America, and there was a question about veteran stones in our historic cemetery, which is quite old. And we can't read those stones. The stones are so badly overgrown with lichens and such, that the stones actually need to be cleaned. So it's restoration of the stones.
Yeah.
Is that something that falls in the purview of one of these potential funding sources?
Yeah, we'd have to get back to you on that. I do believe the Restoration Fund has been used towards that. Now, that's a matching grant program, but we would have to get back to you on that to confirm whether but I think the Restoration Fund would be the only one that would make sense, or that would.
If I
close.
may, if you're
Yeah.
just looking to clean up the stones, there's plenty of do-it-yourself guides online about how to clean those effectively and with minimal impact to the soft stone beneath it. If you'd like to reach out, I can send you some resources to help with that.
That would be helpful, because some of these stones clearly are from the 1600s, or so they're
Right.
quite old.
During my survey work, I was privileged to see someone doing some cleaning, and it was not as complicated as one might think.
Thank you.
Of course.
So the next question is about, can someone explain what a CLG is? It's a certified local government, and why only 33 of Connecticut's 169 municipalities are designated. That is a question for my colleague, Mary Dunn, and she is actually on this call, so she is happy to answer this question. Mary?
Yeah, hi.
Hi.
Hello. And sorry, my video is not working. There's actually 51 certified local governments designated in Connecticut, which still isn't 100%. But CLGs or local municipalities apply to the program at their own discretion. It's a choice that they make. Although I do a lot of outreach and try to get people to become CLGs. So we probably certify about 1 or 2 a year. It does not restrict municipalities from getting funding, because our survey and planning grants are available to nonprofits and municipalities. The Certified Local Government Program just offers an extra bit of funding. It does provide non-matching grants of up to $20,000 to municipalities for historic preservation, education, and pre-planning and development. And I'd be happy to. I don't want to, suck up the the talk here. So I'd be happy to speak with any municipality that's interested in applying to become a CLG.
Yeah, it should add that it can be a match for some of the grant, not necessarily state grant programs, but since it's state money. Well, actually, no, that's right. This is federal money, right, Mary? So it actually can be used to match with some of the state programs on occasion.
Yeah.
Correct?
Yep. Yeah, we've had a few instances of that. Yep.
So it's a great benefit, and it, as Mary said, it's more of like creating a partnership rather than restricting in any way. So feel free to reach out, and we can put you in touch with Mary directly if you don't have her contact information. Anyone else?
I just generally wanted to say welcome to Stefan. I'm so excited that you're on the team and look forward to bringing you to Norwich at some point.
I'm always down to come visit.
I would hope so. I've dragged Mike down here plenty of times, so I'm looking forward to dragging you too.
Well, we're very excited, definitely, to have Stefan on the team.
Could I add to my question?
Sure.
A little bit? Yeah. In terms of finding the stone foundation there, I don't know what this is called, but is there a computer-generated thing that I can use on the surface to tell me if there is any foundation under there, stones under there?
You could use LiDAR mapping to give you a better idea. You know, it really helps show down to like, you know, very small scale deviations in elevation of the surface.
Okay.
So that might help show, especially like if you look at it and it looks like a nice, perfect little square, that's very indicative of a foundation being under there. But that's really the only thing apart from looking at historic maps that I could think.
There's also ground penetrating radar. If you want to,
right, but that would require.
Yeah, if you want to spend some money.
Yes, that would require a lot of
You'd
money.
also find all the fenders that were ever buried there.
Tim, this is Kathy at SHPO. Those are great suggestions. The easiest is, and the first thing I'm going to say to you is, do you own this property? Because you're going to want to contact the property owner first.
Yeah, I own it.
Okay, then the easiest thing that you can do is go buy yourself a big piece of rebar. You can put it into the ground, and if you're meeting a lot of resistance, especially if that resistance, you could measure it and it's tightly bound, you're probably got a lot of stones under there.
Okay. Rebar, okay.
Yeah, or any type of, you know, something that's rigid and you can use to poke, but really what you're looking for is to find large stones under the ground is pretty easy. You just push something down until you meet with resistance. And I think if you find resistance, you know, in this circumscribed area, I think you got a pretty good indication that you still have the foundation stones there.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Anytime.
Thanks, Kathy. So would it be possible one more time for us to review the deadlines for the grant applications? We just got a question asking that, Mike.
The only one of ours that is currently open is the maintenance and repair grant program. And again, that's for religious organizations. And there is a pre-application, which is followed by an invitation-only application. The pre-application can be found online, and that is due on the 31st of this month.
And you can contact any of us if you need help, you know, putting that together. We all can chip in on that.
And then if invited to apply, I believe the application is due on March 10th or thereabouts. But that information's on our website as well.
Yep. And then the SHPO grant information is all in a link that was included earlier. We can put that up too for you. But the survey and planning grant it's a rolling deadline for those grants, and the HRF, the next round is due, gosh, I don't know the exact date. I would encourage you to go to the website to get that information, the State Historic Preservation Office website. But we did include the link here. Anyone else? Well, thank you.
Well, we may want to go, well, unless we want to call it, if you go to the previous slide, no, the next slide before that. It just had, yeah, okay. I forget which slide it was, but.
I was hitting the other way and it just kept going forward. Hold on.
Yeah, well, yeah, it had the terms like easement, Environmental Protection Act. And not that we really had that much time to go through all of them, but I don't know, Stacey, one just, well, first of all, see if Jordan can find it. Sorry, I must have screwed this up. So, hey, we do rehearse this. So keep going. Yeah, let's see. I mean, we don't have to do this, but I just, they were some real important terms in historic preservation. And keep going. Yeah, keep going.
Hold on, sorry, it's really slow.
There.
This one?
So I mean, we don't have to go through all of them, but you know, we do get constant questions of how should we protect our house, our building, and these are some of the tools. And again, we don't have to go through all of it today. And certainly, if you look at this and say, "What is this?" we certainly can answer the questions later. But there are ways. The point is, there are ways to protect below ground as well as above ground resources, and you know, our goal is to try to do that as well. And these are some of the tools. There's others, but these are some of the tools that can accomplish that.
Absolutely. So, great, Jordan. Thank you for putting those up again. That was my last request from the group to put up the emails again. And all of our emails are on our website too. So please do feel free to reach out to us. And thank you for joining us today. Next week, we're taking a little break, and we are going to be back the following week with, there's a slide, it's coming up, but Connecticut Landmarks, they're going to be talking about combating a changing climate, and it's going to be the first in the rest of our series. So please join us for that, and thank you for joining us today. Take care, everybody.
Great job, Stacy. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.